Parliament, and myself, Dawat Sharif. I'm also member of Parliament. On behalf of the Tibetan government in exile, जो तिब्बत निवासक सरकार की तरफ से हम हर साल हम हर दुनिया में और इंडियन में हम चाहता है अभियान कुछ कैंपेन करने के लिए तिब्बत के विषय में, जो तिब्बत में जो अभी स्थिति है उसके विषय में हम जागरूकता करने के लिए और लोगों का समाधान ढूंढने लेने के लिए हम जा रहा था। इसी की वजह से हम तीन का इस बार ड्यूटी लगा है, जम्मू कश्मीर, लद्दाख और हिमाचल का। तो हमने 27 तारीख को जो अगस्त 27 तारीख से हमने जम्मू से शुरू किया था। 5 दिन हमने जम्मू में रहा था और 1 तारीख को हम यहाँ पहुंचा है। कल हम लद्दाख चले जाए। हमारा साथ हमारा भाई सहयोग मंच के प्रतिनिधि हमारा संजीव मनोतराग से है और सैनी है, हमारा साथ जोड़ा है। 10 दिन से हमारा साथ जो आगे लद्दाख में जाएंगे, उसके बाद हम दिल्ली भी जाएंगे। तो हमारा यहाँ का जम्मू कश्मीर की जितना मिनिस्टर है, जो एक्स प्रेसिडेंट, जो भी MP है, MLA है, उनसे मिलके और खास करके जो हर पार्टी के जो नेता है उनको मिला है, जम्मू में मिला है, यहाँ भी मिला है। तो ये हमारा इंट्रोडक्शन है और हमारा जो मकसद था उसके बारे में ब्रीफ जो प्रेस नोट है मैडम पढ़ा जाएंगे।
Distinct population, governments and maintain diplomatic relations with its neighboring countries. Geographically, Tibet exists as a buffer state for more than 2,000 years between two Asian giants, India and China, until its illegal occupation of China in 1959. So now read out the 10 points which is appeal to the government of India and its people. In view of these circumstances, we propose the following appeals to a government and urge to: first, recognize Tibet as an occupied nation with its own independent and sovereign powers backed by historical evidence. Second, desist from endorsing China's fall narrative by labeling Tibetans as a minority, referring to Tibet's occupation as an internal issue of Beijing and proclaiming Tibet as a part of China, thereby aiding China's colonization of Tibet and the subjugation of Tibetans, while denying us Tibetans the space and scope to negotiate for more meaningful freedom for Tibetans. Number 3, call on the People's Republic of China to re-engage in substantive dialogue with the representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama without preconditions to resolve the Tibet issue, China conflict through the middle way approach, policy of seeking within the framework of the PRC's constitution. Number 4, call upon the United Nations Framework Convention on Climatic Change to launch scientific research the exploitation of Tibet's natural resources and its negative impact on global climate repression in Tibet, and urge the government to adopt a Magnitsky Act to put Chinese officials on a national list of sanctions. Number 8, establish a national legislature in democratic institutions, political polarization, and threatens regional and global geopolitical stability and peace. Number 9, expand and deepen your official and diplomatic engagements with the Central Tibetan Administration, which is the continuation of the former government Tibet's independent Tibet in Lhasa as the legitimate representatives of the Tibetan people. Last, number 10, to urge the legislators to express their concern, raise their voice over the human rights violation in Tibet to all the available platforms. We remain immensely grateful to your government and its people for standing for Tibet, for standing for truth, and for keeping alive our faith and peace and justice. Thank you very much.
Madam Dolma, I want to ask you, actually both, all the three of you, that Mr. Dalai Lama, the spiritual Buddhist guru, was last month camping in Ladakh, and there was a lot of functions there. Also, the situation between, the relations between India and China is not good. So how do you expect that India will stand up for the Tibet? No doubt the Free Tibet movement is going on for a long time now.
See, that's a very important question. So that has to be answered. For this purpose, we come to campaign here, door to door, to the ministers, the leaders of the Indian leaders and public and NGOs. Because if this, the claiming of China the border, so-called border, is totally illegal. The releasing of recently they released a map saying that Arunachal and Ladakh and Sejin are their territory. That is totally illegal. It should be condemned by every person who loves the respect to the human rights, because there was no single inch of border between the India and China before 1959, and it so-called border is Tibetan India. So there's no right to the China to call that. So therefore, the Indian people, Indian leaders should politically stand up more against to the expansionist policy of China government, or particularly Xi Jinping, who come to power and he tried to provoke strongly against the Indian and his neighbor country.
Sir, I had two questions. Anyone of you can answer that. How far is the Tibetan language and culture being impacted under the Chinese rule? And secondly, how far is concern for the Tibetan leadership, especially the native leadership like yours, the growing clout of China in the world politics? How far it is concerning for voices like you?
See, that's one of our weakness, saying that China is very powerful. We don't understand what is happening inside the China. China's economic conditions totally depend on the public's money. Once the public demanded their money withdrawn there, the Chinese finished of there. And also, if the world trade with the Chinese good stop, like Indian buying a lot of millions and millions buying a Chinese good, if we stop this boycotting Chinese good, China will suffer for the economic. So we shouldn't think that, oh, our China is very powerful, China is we should forget this thing. This is totally, we set a big, has a wrong mind in our mind. So China, the Indian is not, 23 Indian is not a 1962 Indians. Indian history, 21st centuries, 2023 is India. So we have a power. The India can stand against the China anytime, anywhere. So that another thing, the impact of the Tibetan language and culture to the Chinese people. Now, in 1949, the Chinese communists come to exist. After that, the Buddhism and Tibetan culture, even the China Han's believer of practitioner of the Buddhism, but after 49 is finished, totally finished up, completed, erected. But now since last 5-6 years, there's more than 5 or 6 million Chinese are following Buddhism. So it shows that the Buddhism, peaceful and peaceful, loving kindness in religion or thought or philosophy is impacting very much to the Chinese people, where they are gaining their own religion. They've been practicing for more than 1,000 years before 1949.
There have been few countries that have been made partners in the BRICS alliance. How do you see India's participation, because BRICS is considered a Chinese-driven alliance, and more dominant? How do you see India's participation in this?
I mean, we respect to the good relation between the Indian and China, but not sacrifice the Indian